Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, New York. Emily Carter was having the worst day of her professional life when she received the phone call that would change everything. "Miss Carter," the voice was crisp, professional, with a hint of Boston sophistication. "This is Catherine Brooks, personal assistant to Mr. Nathan Brooks. I'm calling to confirm your attendance at tonight's charity gala." Emily paused mid-stride on the busy sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, nearly dropping the stack of rejection letters she was carrying, along with her third cup of coffee that day. "I'm sorry. I think there's been some mistake." "Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad I reached you. Mr. Brooks is quite eager to meet you. Your table is reserved for 8 o'clock, and as we discussed, you'll be seated as his special companion for the evening. The media will be there." "So, wait, media?" Emily nearly shouted, causing a businessman in an expensive suit to give her a wide berth. "I think you've called the wrong person. I'm Emily Carter, freelance journalist, currently unemployed, and I have no idea who you think I am." "Perfect. That matches exactly. Emily Carter, 28, Columbia journalism graduate, speaks 3 languages fluently. The information is all correct." Emily stopped walking completely. How did this woman know these details about her? "Mr. Brooks will compensate you $50,000 for tonight's appearance," Catherine continued casually, as if discussing the weather. "Half deposited now, half after the event. Oh, and we've sent an appropriate dress to your apartment. It should arrive within the hour. $50,000. Emily looked at her phone's banking app. $247.83. 2 months behind on rent, empty refrigerator, student loan payments past due. What exactly would I have to do? Simply be his date for the evening. Smile. Be charming. I'm sure that will come naturally. Mr. Brooks needs a convincing girlfriend for a few hours. Business reasons, you understand?" Emily didn't understand, but $50,000 spoke louder than her confusion. "And if I agree, that means you'll receive $25,000 immediately. I can transfer it while we speak." Emily's phone buzzed. Banking notification. Deposit received. $25,000. She stared at the screen, blinked several times, looked again. The number was still there. "So," Catherine said smoothly, "shall we say 8 o'clock? 4 hours later, Emily stood in front of her bathroom mirror wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent. It was midnight blue, elegant but not ostentatious, and fit her curves as if it had been custom-made, which she suspected it probably had been. The doorbell rang. Emily opened it to find a uniformed driver. "Miss Carter, system." Here is the revised text with all character names changed, maintaining the content and length of the original text. Manhattan, New York. Emma Larson was having the worst day of her professional life when she received the phone call that would change everything. "Miss Larson." The voice was crisp, professional, with a hint of Boston sophistication. "This is Abigail Foster, personal assistant to Mr. Julian Foster. I'm calling to confirm your attendance at tonight's charity gala." Emma paused mid-stride on the busy sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, nearly dropping the stack of rejection letters she was carrying, along with her third cup of coffee that day. "I'm sorry. I think there's been some mistake." "Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad I reached you. Mr. Foster is quite eager to meet you. Your table is reserved for 8 o'clock, and as we discussed, you'll be seated as his special companion for the evening. The media will be there." "So, wait, media?" Emma nearly shouted, causing a businessman in an expensive suit to give her a wide berth. "I think you've called the wrong person. I'm Emma Larson, freelance journalist, currently unemployed, and I have no idea who you think I am." "Perfect. That matches exactly. Emma Larson, 28, Columbia journalism graduate, speaks 3 languages fluently. The information is all correct." Emma stopped walking completely. How did this woman know these details about her? "Mr. Foster will compensate you $50,000 for tonight's appearance." Abigail continued casually, as if discussing the weather. "Half deposited now, half after the event. Oh, and we've sent an appropriate dress to your apartment. It should arrive within the hour. $50,000. Emma looked at her phone's banking app. $247.83. 2 months behind on rent, empty refrigerator, student loan payments past due. What exactly would I have to do? Simply be his date for the evening. Smile. Be charming. I'm sure that will come naturally. Mr. Foster needs a convincing girlfriend for a few hours. Business reasons, you understand. Emma didn't understand, but $50,000 spoke louder than her confusion. And if I agree, that means you'll receive $25,000 immediately. I can transfer it while we speak. Emma's phone buzzed. Banking notification. Deposit received. $25,000. She stared at the screen, blinked several times, looked again. The number was still there. So, Abigail said smoothly, shall we say 8 o'clock? 4 hours later, Emma stood in front of her bathroom mirror, wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent. It was midnight blue, elegant but not ostentatious, and fit her curves as if it had been custom-made, which she suspected it probably had been. The doorbell rang. Emma opened it to find a uniformed driver. Miss Larson, I'm here to escort you to the plaza. The car, a sleek black Mercedes, felt like stepping into another world. Emma settled into the leather seats, trying not to look too impressed, and checked her phone again. $25,000, real money, in her actual account. When they arrived at the Plaza Hotel, Emma understood why they needed a fake girlfriend. The ballroom was filled with at least 300 elegantly dressed people, half of them clearly New York elite, the other half apparently international dignitaries. Camera flashes popped constantly throughout the room. There, Abigail appeared beside her as if materialized from thin air. She was a woman in her 42nd, impeccably dressed, who surveyed Emma with professional approval. You look perfect. I still don't know anything about him. What if I can't pull this off? You'll be fine. Abigail's smile was confident. You've been dating Julian for 2 months. You met at a book launch in Soho. You're passionate about investigative journalism and social justice. He knows you speak Spanish and French, so feel free to impress. Oh, and call each other darling or sweetheart, but don't overdo it. Wait, I haven't even seen what he looks like. What if I don't recognize him? You will. Abigail nodded toward the center of the room. Trust me. Emma followed her gaze and immediately understood what Abigail meant. Julian Foster was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, broad shoulders that filled out his tuxedo perfectly, and an easy smile that seemed genuine even in this obviously artificial environment. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Deep, green, intelligent, and when they met hers across the crowded room, there was something there that made her forget to breathe for a moment. Go. Abigail gave her a gentle push. He's waiting. Emma made her way through the crowd, her heart hammering. When she was just a few feet away, Julian turned fully toward her, and that smile became even more devastating. Emma, his voice was deep, warm, with just a hint of a California accent that somehow made her name sound like music. You look absolutely stunning. For a second, she forgot this was all fake. The way he said it, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, it felt completely real. Thank you, darling. The endearment came out more naturally than she'd expected. Julian offered his arm, and when she took it, he leaned down to murmur in her ear, Thank you for doing this. I know it must seem completely insane. A little, she whispered back, smiling for the cameras that had already turned their attention to them. But the money helps with the insanity. He laughed, a genuine laugh that sent a flutter through her stomach. Good to know you're here purely for mercenary reasons. Makes things less complicated. Somehow, Emma wasn't sure that was true. The evening was surreal. Julian was the perfect escort. Attentive. Funny. Including her in every conversation. When a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley started speaking in rapid-fire industry jargon, Julian said casually, Emma's got a better grasp of the tech world than I do. She wrote an exposé on data privacy that got picked up by the Times. That was actually true. It had been one of her last published pieces before the freelance work dried up. But the look of genuine pride on Julian's face when he said it made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Impressive, the entrepreneur said, and suddenly Emma found herself in an animated discussion about corporate accountability, while Julian watched with what looked like real admiration. You didn't tell me you were brilliant, he said quietly when the tech guy moved on. You didn't ask, Emma replied, taking a sip of champagne that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. What else didn't Abigail tell you about me? Apparently, everything important. Julian studied her with curiosity, like the fact that you're going to be impossible to forget. The words hung between them, charged with something that definitely wasn't in their arrangement. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, photographs, and a growing awareness that Julian Foster wasn't what she'd expected from a billionaire who needed to hire a fake girlfriend. He was sharp, had a wicked sense of humor, and treated everyone from the waitstaff to fellow billionaires with the same easy respect. More troubling, he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say, not just polite fake boyfriend interest, but real engagement with her thoughts on journalism, politics, social issues. When it came time to leave, Emma realized she didn't want the night to end. "Thank you," Julian said as they reached the hotel's entrance. "You were perfect, better than perfect. It was actually fun." Emma hesitated. "Julian, can I ask you something? Why did you need a fake girlfriend?" He looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. "My family thinks I should be married by now, especially my grandmother, who controls the majority stake in our company." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that shouldn't have been attractive, but absolutely was. "Tonight was crucial for some international partnerships, and she made it clear that if I showed up alone again, there would be consequences. So, you hired a girlfriend?" "Abigail hired one. I didn't even know your name until this afternoon." He paused. "Actually, how did Abigail get your information?" "She was pretty vague when I asked." A strange feeling crept up Emma's spine. "I don't know. I assumed you knew." They looked at each other, and Emma had the uncomfortable sensation that there was something important they were both missing. "The car will take you home," Julian said finally. "And Emma, if you'd like, maybe we could have dinner again. No cameras, no contract, just because." Emma's heart skipped. "I'd like that." His smile was the same one that had made her forget this was an act. "Then it's a date." When Emma got home an hour later, she checked her phone and saw that the remaining payment had been transferred, $50,000, enough to solve all her immediate problems and then some. But as she got ready for bed, Emma realized she wasn't thinking about the money. She was thinking about deep green eyes and the way Julian had said her name. She was thinking about his genuine laugh and how he treated everyone at the gala with such natural respect. She was thinking about how, for a few hours, pretending to be Julian Foster's girlfriend had felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Had an amazing time tonight. Coffee tomorrow? Julian." Emma smiled at her phone. Maybe Abigail Foster had made the perfect mistake, but as she drifted off to sleep, a nagging thought lingered. How exactly had Abigail gotten her personal information so easily? And why had she chosen Emma specifically out of all the women in New York City? 3 days later, Manhattan. Emma was still floating on cloud 9 when her best friend Lila burst into her apartment without knocking, carrying 2 iced coffees and wearing her signature. "I need all the details. Expression." "Okay, spill everything. And I mean everything." Lila dropped onto the couch that Emma could now actually afford to replace. "You disappear for a night, come back with designer clothes and this mysterious glow, pay 3 months of rent in cash, and think I won't notice." Emma tried to look innocent. "I got a freelance assignment." "A freelance assignment that pays $50,000 for one night? What did you write? The secret formula for eternal youth?" Lila raised an eyebrow. "And don't think I didn't see you Googling Julian Foster for 2 hours yesterday." Busted. Emma sighed and told Lila everything. The mysterious phone call, the confusion about her identity, the fake girlfriend setup, and most importantly, how Julian had asked her out for real. "Wait, hold up." Lila held up a hand. "You're telling me that some random assistant called you by mistake? You went along with being a fake girlfriend, and now you're actually falling for the guy?" "I'm not falling for him," Emma protested weakly. "We just connected. Connected while you were literally being paid to fake a connection." "But it didn't feel fake," Emma insisted. "Lila, you should have seen how he treated everyone. The way he talked about his work, his values. He's not what I expected from a billionaire playboy." Lila studied her friend's face. Honey, you realize this sounds like the beginning of every Hallmark movie ever made, right? And those don't always translate well to real life." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Looking forward to coffee today. I made us a reservation at that little place in Brooklyn Heights you mentioned loving." Emma frowned. "I never mentioned any place in Brooklyn Heights." "What?" Lila leaned over to read the message. "He says I mentioned some coffee shop in Brooklyn Heights, but we never talked about specific places." A strange look crossed Lila's face. What exactly did this Abigail woman tell you about why they chose you? She said they had my information, name, age, education, languages. She seemed to know everything about me, and you didn't find that weird? I was broke and desperate. $50,000 doesn't make you ask too many questions. Lila was quiet for a moment, then grabbed Emma's laptop. What's Julian's full name again? Julian Foster. Why? Julian Thomas Foster. Lila read from a Forbes article, CEO of Foster Enterprises, one of America's largest tech consulting firms. Harvard MBA. Speaks 4 languages. Never married. She paused. Look at this. She turned the laptop around. There was a photo of Julian at a business conference, and standing beside him, looking very professional, was a woman Emma recognized. That's Abigail. But look at the caption. Emma read aloud. Julian Foster with his business partner and sister. Abigail Foster. Sister. Lila repeated. His sister set this up. A cold realization crept up Emma's spine. But why would his own sister? Lila was already typing. Let me search for Emma Larson, Manhattan journalist. Oh my gosh. What? There are tons of Emma Larsons in New York. But look at this. She clicked on a LinkedIn profile. Emma Larson, 28, journalist, Columbia graduate, speaks 3 languages. It was a different woman. Similar age, similar background, but definitely not Emma. She lives in Brooklyn Heights. Lila continued reading. Near that coffee shop Julian mentioned. And look at her photo. The woman in the photo was stunning, tall, blonde, polished, everything Emma felt she wasn't. This is who they meant to hire, Emma said slowly. This is Julian's actual type. It gets stranger, Lila said, scrolling through more search results. This Emma Larson was recently featured in Vanity Fair's Rising Stars under 30 list. She runs her own media company. Lila's voice trailed off. What? She's dating someone, a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley. Lila looked up at Emma. I don't think this was just a random mistake. Emma's phone rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Lila whispered. But be careful. Hi, Julian. Emma, I'm sorry, but I need to cancel coffee. His voice sounded strange, tense. Something unexpected came up. Is everything okay? Yes. Maybe we can reschedule. There was something in his tone that made Emma's stomach drop. Julian, did something happen? A pause. Can I ask you something? And please be honest. Of course. Did you know who I was before Abigail called you? The question hit like a punch. What do you mean? I mean, did you know about my company, my family before that night? Julian, I'd never heard of you before Abigail called. I swear. Another pause. Okay. I'll call you later. He hung up, leaving Emma staring at her phone. That didn't sound good, Lila observed. No, it didn't. Emma sank onto the couch. Lila, what if this whole thing was orchestrated? What if someone wanted me to meet Julian specifically? But who and why? Before Emma could answer, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a courier with an envelope addressed to her. Inside was a single photograph and a note written in elegant handwriting. The photograph showed Julian and Emma at the charity gala, laughing together. They looked genuinely happy, like a real couple. The note read, "Some mistakes are meant to happen. Don't let pride ruin what could be beautiful. A friend who believes in destiny." Okay, this is officially creepy, Lila said, reading over Emma's shoulder. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from the number Abigail had used. Don't answer it, Lila warned. But Emma was tired of being confused and manipulated. She answered, Abigail? Actually, this is Julian. His voice was tight. I borrowed Abigail's phone because I had some questions for her. Questions about how she found you, and she's not answering them very well. But I did find something interesting in her office. What? A file with your name on it. Your real file. Not the other Emma Larson. Photos of you, your address, your work history, even your favorite coffee shop. Julian paused. Someone has been watching you, Emma, for weeks. The apartment suddenly felt very cold. Julian, I had nothing to do with this. I swear. I believe you. But someone wanted us to meet, and they went to considerable lengths to make it happen. His voice softened slightly. "The question is why?" Emma looked at the photograph again, the two of them laughing, looking so natural together. "Maybe," she said slowly, "we should find out together." "What do you mean?" "I mean, whoever did this clearly wants us together. Maybe instead of fighting it, we figure out who and why. That's either very brave or very foolish. Probably both." "But Julian, what we had that night, the connection, was that real for you?" A long pause. "Yes, it was real." "Then maybe that's what matters. Emma, you realize someone has been manipulating both of us. This could be dangerous, or it could be the best mistake that ever happened to us." Another pause. "Are you always this optimistic about potentially dangerous situations?" "Only when they involve handsome billionaires and mysterious sisters." Julian laughed, that same genuine laugh from the charity gala. "All right, but we do this carefully. And together," Emma agreed. After hanging up, Lila shook her head. "You know this is crazy, right?" "Completely crazy," Emma agreed, but she was smiling. "But Lila, what if whoever did this actually did us a favor? What if they saw something we couldn't see ourselves? Or what if they're complete psychopaths trying to manipulate you both for some unknown reason?" "Well," Emma said, looking at the photograph of her and Julian again, "I guess we're about to find out." That evening, Julian's penthouse, Upper East Side. Julian's penthouse overlooked Central Park, and under normal circumstances, Emma would have been speechless at the view. But tonight, she was more focused on the wall of family photos Julian had been showing her, trying to piece together the puzzle of Abigail's motives. There, Julian pointed to a photo of himself with an elegant older woman. "That's my grandmother, Evelyn Foster, the family matriarch I mentioned. She's been pressuring me about marriage since I turned 30. She looks formidable," Emma observed, studying the silver-haired woman who radiated authority even in a casual family photo. "She is. Built the tech side of our business from scratch after my grandfather focused on traditional investments." Julian moved to another photo. "And this is Abigail with our parents. They died in a car accident when I was 22 and she was 18. Emma's heart clenched. "Julian, I'm so sorry. It's been 10 years, but it made Abigail and me incredibly close. We only had each other and grandmother Evelyn." His expression darkened slightly, which is why what she did feels like such a betrayal. Emma was studying the photos when something caught her eye. "Julian, who's that?" She pointed to a young woman in several of the photos, always standing close to Julian, but somehow seeming separate from the family group. Julian's jaw tightened. "That's Lauren Caldwell, my ex-fiancée." "Ex-fiancée?" Emma turned to face him. "You didn't mention being engaged. It ended 18 months ago. Mutual decision." But his tone suggested it had been anything but mutual. "Our families had been friends since childhood. Very traditional arrangement, very convenient for business." "What happened?" Julian walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. "I realized I didn't want to marry someone just because it made sense on paper. I wanted to marry someone I actually loved." The word love hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, and Lauren wasn't pleased. Neither was her family or mine, for that matter. Julian turned back to Emma. "Breaking that engagement damaged some important business relationships, cost us a major merger with the Caldwell Group." Emma felt a chill of understanding. "Julian, what if Abigail's matchmaking isn't just about your grandmother wanting you married? What if it's about your family wanting you married to someone who won't disrupt business? You mean someone they can control, or someone they think would be better for the company than my independent streak?" Julian's phone buzzed. Abigail's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Emma said, "but put it on speaker." "Abigail," Julian said, his voice carefully neutral. "Jules, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you." Abigail's voice was cheerful, but there was an undertone of tension. "How did coffee go with Emma?" Julian looked at Emma. "We rescheduled. Abigail, I need answers. About how exactly you found Emma her real contact information, not some professional network nonsense." A pause. "Jules, sweetheart, why all the questions? Isn't it enough that it worked out perfectly? You two looked absolutely magical together at the gala." "Abigail?" Julian's voice was sharper now. "I found the surveillance file in your office. The one with Emma's photos and personal information going back weeks." Silence on the other end. "Abigail." "All right. Fine." Abigail's voice changed, becoming more serious. Do you remember Café Gramercy? You go there every Tuesday morning for your standing meeting with the patent attorneys. Julian frowned. Yes, 4 weeks ago, you helped a young woman who dropped her laptop bag in the rain. You gave her your umbrella and helped her save her work. Emma's breath caught. She remembered that morning perfectly. She'd been rushing to meet a potential client, clumsy and stressed, when a kind stranger had literally saved her laptop and her assignment. That was you, Julian said, staring at Emma. You were so kind to me, Emma whispered. I never forgot it. Neither did Abigail, apparently, Julian said, still looking at Emma, but speaking to the phone. You were watching. I was having a business lunch at the table by the window, Abigail admitted. And Jules, the way you looked at her. I'd never seen you look at anyone like that. Not even Lauren. So, you decided to manipulate us both. I decided to give fate a helping hand. Abigail's composure was cracking. Jules, you've been miserable since you broke up with Lauren. And this girl, Emma, she practically glowed when you helped her. I could see it from across the cafe. So, you had her investigated. I had her researched. There's a difference. Not to me. Jules, listen. No, you listen. Julian's voice was ice cold now. You violated both our privacy. You manipulated us into a fake relationship. And you did it all without our consent. I did it because I love you. Abigail's professional mask finally slipped completely. Jules, our family has been pushing you to reconcile with Lauren for months. Grandmother Evelyn, the board of directors, even the Caldwells are still hoping you'll come to your senses. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. This was bigger than just family pressure. They don't care if you're happy, Abigail continued, her voice thick with emotion. They care about stock prices and merger opportunities. Lauren's family still controls 15% of Foster Enterprises stock, and they're threatening to sell to our competitors if you don't. If I don't. What? Julian's voice was deadly quiet. If you don't give the relationship another chance, and you thought hiring Emma would solve this, how exactly? I thought if you met someone real, someone who could love you for you and not your portfolio, you'd finally have the strength to stand up to them all. Emma found her voice. Abigail, what makes you think I'm the right person for that? Because you didn't know who he was when you met him in the cafe, but you still smiled at him like he'd made your whole day. Because when he helped you, you looked at him like he was a hero, not a bank account. And, Abigail's voice softened, because I've watched my brother be lonely for 18 months, afraid to trust anyone new because he thinks they're all after his money. But with you, even in fake circumstances, he was himself again. Julian was staring at Emma, and she could see him processing everything. There's something else you both need to know, Abigail said quietly. What now? Julian asked, though he sounded resigned rather than angry. Grandmother Evelyn wants to meet Emma tomorrow. Julian went very still. What? She saw the photos from the charity gala in the Times Society section. She's intrigued. Abigail, absolutely not. Jules, she's flying in from the Hamptons specifically to meet her. If you don't bring Emma, then I don't bring her. Grandmother Evelyn will have to be disappointed. She said if you show up without your girlfriend, she'll assume you're not serious about anyone, and she'll support the board's recommendation about Lauren. Emma saw Julian go pale. What board recommendation? The merger proposal. Lauren's family is offering to drop their threat to sell their shares if you agree to a 6-month reconciliation period, which is just code for get back together or lose the company, Julian said grimly. Pretty much, Abigail admitted. Emma watched Julian's face as he realized the trap he was in. This wasn't just about family expectations. It was about his life's work. Julian, Emma said quietly, maybe I should meet her. No, I won't drag you into this mess. I'm already in it. And besides, she managed a small smile. I'm curious about the woman who raised someone like you. Emma, you don't understand. My grandmother is formidable. She'll see through any pretense immediately. Then we don't pretend. We tell her the truth, that we met by chance, that we're getting to know each other, and that we're not making any promises about the future. Julian looked at her for a long moment. You're serious. I'm serious. Abigail, Julian said into the phone, set up the meeting, but somewhere public, somewhere Emma will feel comfortable. Actually, Abigail said hesitantly, she wants to have brunch at the family estate in the Hamptons. Absolutely not. It's not really a request, Jules. It's more of a royal summons. Julian closed his eyes. Fine. But I'm driving Emma myself, and we leave when we want to leave. Agreed. 11 o'clock tomorrow. After Abigail hung up, Julian and Emma sat in silence for a moment. You know you don't have to do this, Julian said finally. I know, but Julian, I want to meet the woman who shaped you, and I want her to know that the woman you're falling for isn't going anywhere just because she doesn't come from money. Julian stared at her. Falling for? Emma blushed, but met his eyes. Aren't you? I am, completely. But Emma, if my grandmother decides she doesn't approve of you, then we'll figure it out together. Julian reached for her hand. You realize my family is completely dysfunctional, right? So is mine. You just haven't met them yet. Is that an invitation? Maybe, if you survive tomorrow. Julian laughed and pulled her closer. You know, for a woman who was accidentally hired to be my fake girlfriend, you're remarkably brave about meeting terrifying family matriarchs. Well, Emma said, settling into his arms, someone has to keep you from getting back together with Lauren Caldwell. Is that jealousy I detect? Maybe a little. Julian kissed the top of her head. Good. I like you jealous. Julian. Yeah? Tomorrow, when we meet your grandmother, what if she actually likes me? Then, Julian said, we'll have an even bigger problem. Why? Because then she'll want to plan our wedding. Emma laughed, but part of her wondered if that would really be such a problem after all. The Hamptons, New York, Foster family estate. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours, giving Emma plenty of time to second-guess her decision to meet Evelyn Foster. Julian had tried to prepare her during the drive, describing his grandmother as brilliant, intimidating, and capable of seeing through any deception within 30 seconds, which wasn't exactly reassuring. She built Foster Enterprises' tech division from nothing, Julian explained as they turned into a tree-lined driveway that seemed to stretch for miles. When my grandfather wanted to stick with traditional investments, she convinced him to diversify into emerging technologies. That decision made us one of the wealthiest families in New York. And she controls how much of the company? 60% directly, another 15% through various trusts. She could fire me tomorrow if she wanted to. Julian glanced at Emma, who was staring out the window at the approaching mansion. Having second thoughts? Third and fourth thoughts, Emma admitted. Julian, what if she takes one look at me and decides I'm completely wrong for you? Then she'll be wrong. Julian reached over and squeezed her hand. Emma, my grandmother values authenticity above everything else. Don't try to be someone you're not. Just be the woman who impressed me so much that I forgot our arrangement was fake. The Foster estate was breathtaking, a sprawling Georgian mansion overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, with perfectly manicured gardens and enough land to constitute its own small town. As they pulled up to the main entrance, Emma spotted at least 3 other luxury cars in the circular driveway. We're not the only guests, she observed. Julian's face darkened as he recognized the vehicles. That's Lauren's Mercedes and her parents' Bentley. He looked at Emma apologetically. I'm sorry, I had no idea they'd be here. Your grandmother invited your ex-fiancée to meet your current girlfriend? Apparently so. Julian turned off the engine and turned to face Emma. We can leave right now if you want. Just say the word. Emma looked at the imposing mansion, then at Julian's worried face. She thought about Abigail's words, how Julian had been lonely for 18 months, how his family was trying to force him back into a relationship that would benefit business but not his heart. No, she said firmly. If this is some kind of test, then let's pass it. Julian smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all morning. Have I mentioned that you're incredible? Not nearly enough. They were met at the front door by a uniformed butler who looked like he'd been with the family for decades. Mr. Julian, Miss Larson, Mrs. Foster is expecting you on the terrace. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, priceless artwork, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But Emma barely had time to take it in before they were led through French doors onto a stone terrace overlooking the ocean. Evelyn Foster was holding court at a wrought iron table set for 6, and Emma immediately understood why Julian had called her formidable. She was in her mid-72nd, but looked 20 years younger. With silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything, and an aura of command that made everyone else on the terrace seem like supporting characters. "Julian, darling." Evelyn rose gracefully and embraced her grandson, and this must be the famous Emma Larson. Emma found herself being assessed by the most penetrating gaze she'd ever encountered. Evelyn's handshake was firm, her smile polite but measuring. "Mrs. Foster, thank you so much for inviting me. Your home is absolutely beautiful. Please, call me Evelyn." "And yes, it is beautiful, isn't it? Julian's grandfather and I built it as our retreat from the city. Now it's become something of a family gathering place." Evelyn's eyes never left Emma's face. "I understand you're a journalist." "I am freelance. Mostly investigative pieces." "How interesting. And what draws you to investigative work?" Emma sensed this was more than polite conversation. "I believe people deserve to know the truth, especially when powerful interests would prefer they didn't." Evelyn's eyebrow arched slightly, whether in approval or concern, Emma couldn't tell. "Julian," a familiar voice interrupted. "What a pleasant surprise." Emma turned to see a tall blonde woman approaching from the other end of the terrace. Lauren Caldwell was everything the photos had suggested and more, stunningly beautiful in an effortless old money way, wearing a designer sundress that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Lauren," Julian's voice was carefully neutral, "I didn't know you'd be here. Mother mentioned Evelyn had invited us for brunch. I hope you don't mind." Lauren's smile was perfect as she turned to Emma. "And you must be the journalist." "I'm Lauren Caldwell, Emma Larson. Nice to meet you." Lauren's handshake was as polished as everything else about her. But Emma caught something calculating in her eyes, a quick assessment that left Emma feeling somehow found wanting. "Shall we sit?" Evelyn suggested. "I've had Cook prepare something special." As they settled around the table, Emma found herself strategically placed between Julian and Evelyn, with Lauren directly across from her. The other guests, Lauren's parents, whom Evelyn introduced as Edward and Margaret Caldwell, flanked Lauren like elegant bookends. "So, Emma," Edward Caldwell said as the first course was served, "Julian tells us you graduated from Columbia Journalism School." "Yes, sir. And what was your focus?" Emma sensed another test. "Investigative reporting with an emphasis on corporate accountability." A slight smile played at Evelyn's lips. "How apropos. And what stories have you worked on recently?" "I just completed a piece on tech companies using user data without proper disclosure. It's being reviewed by several publications." "Really?" Lauren leaned forward with apparent interest. "Which companies?" Emma named several major tech firms, including two that she knew were Foster Enterprises clients. She watched Evelyn's reaction carefully, but the older woman's face remained impassive. "How fascinating," Margaret Caldwell said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "And is that lucrative work?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma felt Julian tense beside her. "It can be," Emma replied evenly, "when publications are willing to pay for thorough research and fact-checking. Of course, freelance work must be so unpredictable," Lauren said with apparent sympathy. "The uncertainty, the irregular income. I imagine it would be difficult to plan for the future." Emma realized she was being deliberately provoked. Lauren was pointing out, in the most polite way possible, that Emma was financially unstable and therefore unsuitable for someone in Julian's position. "I find uncertainty keeps life interesting," Emma replied, "and integrity matters more to me than a steady paycheck." "How admirable," Evelyn said, and this time Emma was certain she caught approval in the older woman's voice. "Tell me, Emma, what did you think of the charity gala the other night?" "It was eye-opening. I had no idea how much good could be accomplished when people with resources decide to use them responsibly." "And what did you think of Julian's speech about sustainable technology initiatives?" Emma paused. Julian hadn't given a speech at the gala. This was a trap. Evelyn was testing whether Emma had actually paid attention to Julian or had been focused on the performance aspect of their arrangement. "Actually," Emma said carefully, "Julian didn't give a speech that night, but we did have several interesting conversations about sustainable tech with other guests. His knowledge of renewable energy applications was impressive." Evelyn's smile became genuinely warm for the first time. Indeed, it was. "Julian has been championing environmental initiatives within Foster Enterprises for years, sometimes against considerable resistance," Julian added, glancing meaningfully at the Caldwells. "Change is always difficult," Edward Caldwell said diplomatically. Traditional approaches have served our families well for generations, but tradition without innovation leads to stagnation, Emma observed. The companies that adapt to changing values and technologies are the ones that survive. An interesting perspective, Evelyn said. And what changes do you think are most important for businesses to embrace? Emma found herself in an animated discussion with Evelyn about corporate responsibility, environmental sustainability, and the role of technology in solving social problems. She was vaguely aware that Lauren was growing increasingly quiet, and that Julian was watching the exchange with something like amazement. "Excuse me," Lauren said suddenly, standing. "I think I need some air." She walked to the edge of the terrace, and after a moment, Julian excused himself to follow her. Emma tried not to watch as they engaged in what appeared to be an intense, quiet conversation. "She's lovely," Margaret Caldwell said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Yes, she is," Evelyn replied firmly, "intelligent, principled, and completely unimpressed by wealth or status. Quite refreshing, actually." Emma felt a flush of gratitude toward Evelyn, but she could see the Caldwells exchanging worried glances. "Evelyn, dear," Edward said carefully, "surely you can see that Julian and Lauren have so much history together. They understand each other's worlds. They understand each other's bank accounts." Evelyn corrected sharply. "There's a difference." At the edge of the terrace, Lauren and Julian's conversation seemed to be growing more heated. Emma caught fragments, "Throwing away everything we built and never loved me the way you look at her." Finally, Lauren stalked back to the table, her perfect composure cracked. "I think we should go," she announced to her parents. "This was clearly a mistake." "Lauren, darling," her mother began. "No, Mother, it's obvious that Julian has made his choice." Lauren's eyes flashed as she looked at Emma. "I just hope he doesn't regret it when reality sets in." "What's that supposed to mean?" Julian demanded, returning to the table. "It means that fairy tales don't last, Jules. Eventually, the differences in your backgrounds, your experiences, your expectations, they all matter." Lauren's voice was sad now rather than angry. "I know you think love conquers all, but in our world, compatibility matters more than chemistry." "Lauren," Evelyn's voice was steel. "That's enough." But Lauren wasn't finished. "Ask yourself this, Emma. What happens when the novelty wears off? When Julian's friends and business associates expect you to fit into a world you don't understand? When you realize that being with him means living in a fishbowl, where every decision you make reflects on his family's reputation?" Emma felt the words hit their mark. These were exactly the fears she'd been trying to suppress. "Lauren," Julian's voice was warning. "When you realize," Lauren continued relentlessly, "that you'll never be anything more than a charity case he rescued, that his family will always see you as the woman who wasn't good enough, who needed to be elevated to his level. Enough." Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip. "Lauren Caldwell, you will leave my home immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren looked stricken, as if she hadn't meant to go that far. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did, and now everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." Evelyn stood, radiating dignity and controlled fury. "Edward, Margaret, I think it's time for you to take your daughter home." The Caldwells departed in a flurry of awkward apologies and wounded pride, leaving Emma, Julian, and Evelyn alone on the terrace. Emma was fighting back tears, Lauren's words echoing in her head. The worst part was that some of them rang true. "Emma," Evelyn said gently, settling back into her chair, "I owe you an apology." "You do?" "I invited the Caldwells here today as a test. I wanted to see how you'd handle yourself in a difficult situation, and how Julian would react to having you and Lauren in the same room." Evelyn's expression was rueful. "I didn't anticipate that Lauren would be quite so vicious." "She wasn't entirely wrong, though," Emma said quietly. "Our backgrounds are completely different. I don't know anything about your world." "My dear girl," Evelyn said firmly, "I didn't build foster enterprises by worrying about what other people thought was appropriate. I married a man whose family thought I was beneath them because I was Irish Catholic and worked for a living. They spent years trying to make me feel inadequate." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Do you know what I learned?" Emma shook her head. "That people who try to make you feel small do so because they're threatened by your authenticity. Lauren attacked you because she could see that what you and Julian have is real, something she never had with him. But she's right about the practical issues." "Nonsense. You want to know what I saw today? I saw a young woman who held her own in conversation with some of the most influential people on the East Coast, who showed grace under pressure and didn't back down from her principles when challenged. who clearly makes my grandson happier than I've seen him in years. Evelyn's smile was warm. That's not someone who needs to be elevated to anyone's level. That's someone who elevates others, simply by being herself. Emma felt tears threatening again, but for different reasons this time. Julian, Evelyn continued, you've been an idiot for the past 18 months, trying to find someone who fits some imaginary ideal instead of recognizing real value when it was right in front of you. Don't make that mistake again. Julian reached for Emma's hand. I don't intend to. Good, because Emma, if you're willing to put up with my insufferable grandson and his complicated family, you have my complete support. Evelyn's eyes twinkled. And I should warn you, when Evelyn Foster gives her support, it's rather comprehensive. What do you mean? Emma asked. I mean that the Caldwell's little stock manipulation scheme just became irrelevant. I've been looking for an excuse to buy out their shares anyway. Their business practices have become increasingly questionable. Evelyn's smile turned predatory. Consider it my engagement gift, grandmother, Julian said carefully. We're not engaged. Yet, Evelyn replied serenely. But I have excellent instincts about these things. As if on cue, Abigail appeared on the terrace, slightly out of breath. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder getting out of the city. She stopped short when she saw only the three of them. Where are the Caldwells? Gone, Evelyn said simply, and good riddance. Abigail's eyes widened as she took in the scene. Emma looking slightly stunned, Julian protective and relieved, and Evelyn radiating satisfaction. What did I miss? The end of the Lauren Caldwell era, Julian said, putting his arm around Emma, and hopefully the beginning of something much better. Abigail grinned. So, my matchmaking worked. Your manipulation worked, Julian corrected, but only because you accidentally found exactly the right woman. It wasn't an accident, Abigail said smugly. I told you I have excellent instincts. Apparently, it runs in the family, Evelyn observed. Now, shall we have dessert? I believe we have something to celebrate. As they settled in for what turned into a 3-hour meal filled with family stories, gentle teasing, and increasingly comfortable conversation, Emma began to understand what she'd stumbled into. This wasn't just a wealthy family. It was a group of people who, despite their considerable resources and influence, valued authenticity, intelligence, and loyalty above all else. So what happens now? Emma asked as they prepared to leave. Now? Evelyn said, embracing her warmly. You become part of this family, if you want to. What about the business issues, the board pressure? Evelyn waved dismissively. Let me worry about the board. They'll fall in line once they understand that the Caldwell alliance is no longer beneficial. Her smile turned sharp. I didn't get where I am by letting other people dictate my family's future. During the drive back to Manhattan, Emma and Julian were quiet, both processing the day's events. Are you okay? Julian asked finally. I think so. Your grandmother is not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone cold and intimidating. Instead, she's just formidable. There's a difference. There is. And Emma, about what Lauren said, she wasn't entirely wrong, Emma interrupted. I don't know your world. I don't know the rules, the expectations, the social codes. So, we'll learn together. Emma, I don't want you to change to fit my world. I want my world to be worthy of you. Emma looked at him, this man who'd started as a stranger, become a fake boyfriend, and was now, what exactly? Julian, what are we doing here, really? He pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her. We're falling in love, he said simply. Despite the manipulation, despite the complications, despite the fact that it started as a lie, we're falling in love, and I think we should stop fighting it. Emma studied his face. The strong jaw, the green eyes that had caught her attention that first night, the expression of complete honesty. Your grandmother said she has excellent instincts about engagements. She does. It's actually kind of scary. Julian, yeah? I think I'm ready to stop fighting it too. He kissed her then, right there on the side of the road, with the sun setting behind them and the city lights beginning to twinkle ahead. And for the first time since this whole crazy adventure began, Emma wasn't thinking about money or manipulation or social differences. She was thinking that sometimes the best mistakes are the ones that lead you exactly where you belong. 1 week later, Manhattan. Emma was beginning to think that falling in love with Julian Foster had been the easy part. It was everything that came after that threatened to overwhelm her completely. The past week had been a whirlwind of activity that left her feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. Evelyn had wasted no time in making good on her promise to handle the business complications. By Wednesday, news broke that Foster Enterprises had acquired the Caldwell Group's shares in what the financial press called a brilliant strategic move. By Friday, Lauren Caldwell was reportedly engaged to a banking heir from Boston, which, according to Abigail, was suspiciously convenient timing. But it wasn't the business machinations that had Emma's head spinning. It was the sudden, overwhelming reality of being Julian Foster's very public girlfriend. "You need to see this," Lila said, bursting into Emma's apartment with her laptop and a concerned expression. "It's trending on social media." Emma looked up from the article she was trying to write, a piece about sustainable agriculture that seemed laughably mundane compared to her current life circumstances. "What's trending?" "You are." Lila turned the laptop around, revealing a Twitter thread with thousands of retweets. The header read, "Who is Emma Larson? Everything we know about Julian Foster's mystery girlfriend." Emma's stomach dropped as she scrolled through the thread. Someone had done an impressively thorough investigation of her life, complete with her college graduation photos, excerpts from articles she'd written, and even a picture of her apartment building. "This is insane," she breathed. "How did they get all this information?" "Welcome to dating a billionaire," Lila said grimly. "Look at the comments." The comments were a mix of curiosity, admiration, and outright hostility. Some praised her journalistic work and called her a refreshing change from the usual socialite types. Others questioned her motives, suggested she was a gold digger, and speculated about how long the relationship would last. But it was the comments from other journalists that stung the most. Several writers she'd previously respected had posted variations of, "Guess we know how Emma Larson plans to advance her career now," and from investigating corporations to sleeping with CEOs. "Quite a career pivot." "Emma," Lila said gently, "you knew this was going to happen, right? You can't date someone that famous without people paying attention." "I knew, intellectually, but seeing it all laid out like this." Emma gestured helplessly at the screen. "Lila, they're questioning my professional integrity. These are people whose opinions matter in my field." Her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she answered, trying to sound normal. "Have you seen the social media stuff?" His voice was tight with anger. "Lila is showing me now." "I'm so sorry, Emma. I should have anticipated this. Should have prepared you better. My publicist is already working on damage control." "Your publicist?" "Sarah Thompson. She handles all media relations for Foster Enterprises. She's very good at her job." The idea of needing a publicist to manage her personal life felt surreal. "Julian, I don't know if I'm cut out for this level of scrutiny." "You shouldn't have to be. Listen, I'm coming over. We need to talk about how to handle this." After he hung up, Emma continued scrolling through the social media posts, each one making her feel smaller and more exposed. Lila sat beside her, offering silent support. "You know what the worst part is?" Emma said finally. "Some of these comments aren't wrong. I am from a completely different world than Julian. I am struggling financially. And yes, being with him does change my professional prospects. So what? You think you're the first person to fall in love across social classes? You think Evelyn Foster didn't face the same kind of scrutiny when she married into that family? That was different. She was building something, creating value. I'm just there." Lila grabbed the laptop and closed it firmly. "Emma Larson, you are one of the most talented investigative journalists I know. You've exposed corruption, held powerful people accountable, and done it all, while barely scraping by financially, because you refuse to compromise your principles. Don't let a bunch of internet trolls make you forget who you are." Before Emma could respond, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Julian looking unusually harried, accompanied by a sharp-eyed woman in her 42nd with perfectly styled black hair and an expression of controlled urgency. "Emma, this is Sarah Thompson," Julian said. "Sarah, Emma Larson." Sarah's handshake was brisk and professional. "Miss Larson, we need to discuss strategy immediately. The story is spreading faster than we anticipated, and we need to get ahead of it." "Strategy for what, exactly?" Emma asked, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. "For managing your public image. Right now, the narrative is being written by other people, bloggers, gossip columnists, social media users who don't know you. We need to craft a counter-narrative that presents you in the proper light. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be presented in any light. I just want to be left alone to do my job and live my life." Sarah and Julian exchanged a look. "Miss Larson," Sarah said carefully, "I understand this is overwhelming, but you're dating one of the most prominent businessmen in America. Privacy is no longer an option. The best we can do is control the message. What does that mean practically?" Sarah pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through what appeared to be a detailed presentation. "We start with a carefully crafted interview, maybe with Vanity Fair or Harper's Bazaar. Something that positions you as an system, accomplished professional who happens to be in a relationship with Julian, not as a nobody who got lucky." "But I am a nobody who got lucky," Emma protested. "No," Julian said firmly. "You're an accomplished journalist who happens to be dating me. There's a significant difference." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We emphasize your educational background, your professional achievements, your commitment to social justice. We position this as a meeting of equals." "Except we're not equals," Emma said. "Julian owns companies. I can barely pay my rent. Financial equality isn't the only kind that matters," Sarah replied smoothly. "You bring intellectual equality, moral equality, professional accomplishment. The narrative becomes, successful businessman meets brilliant journalist, finds intellectual and emotional partnership." Lila, who had been listening from the kitchen, suddenly spoke up. "What about the investigation?" Everyone turned to look at her. "Lila," Emma said warningly. "No, I think this is important. Emma, you've been so focused on managing the fallout from your relationship that you've completely forgotten about the mystery behind how it started." Sarah looked confused. "What mystery?" Julian and Emma exchanged glances. They hadn't told anyone outside the family about Abigail's manipulation or the surveillance file. "It's complicated," Julian said finally. "Uncomplicate it," Sarah demanded. "If there are skeletons in this closet, I need to know about them now before someone else digs them up." Emma made a decision. "Lila's right. Sarah, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. But you need to understand what we're really dealing with." Over the next hour, Emma and Julian laid out the entire story. The mistaken phone call, the wrong Emma Larson, Abigail's surveillance and manipulation, even the mysterious note about destiny. Sarah listened with the focused intensity of a crisis management expert, taking notes and asking pointed questions. "So, let me get this straight," Sarah said when they finished. "Your sister hired what she thought was a different woman to be your fake girlfriend, accidentally hired Emma instead, and this accidental meeting led to a real relationship. That's the simplified version." "Yes," Julian confirmed. "And there's documented evidence of surveillance, investigation, and deliberate manipulation." "Yes." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her notes. "This is either the most romantic story I've ever heard, or a potential public relations nightmare." "Which one do you think it is?" Emma asked. "Both. If this story gets out the wrong way, it'll be spun as a billionaire so desperate for companionship that his family had to hire him a girlfriend. The implications for Julian's business reputation would be significant." Emma felt her heart sink. She'd been so focused on her own exposure that she hadn't fully considered how this could damage Julian professionally. "On the other hand," Sarah continued, "if we control the narrative, this becomes the ultimate modern fairy tale. Fate intervening to bring two people together despite the odds, overcoming deception to find real love." "You want us to publicize the manipulation?" Julian asked, incredulous. "I want us to reframe it, not as manipulation, but as destiny with a helping hand. Abigail becomes the loving sister who saw her brother's loneliness and engineered a chance encounter. The surveillance becomes research to ensure compatibility. The fake relationship becomes the catalyst for discovering real feelings." Emma shook her head. "I don't want to lie about what happened. We wouldn't be lying. We'd be emphasizing certain aspects while downplaying others. It's all about perspective." "Sarah," Julian said carefully, "what happens if we don't do any of this? If we just ignore the media attention and let it die down naturally?" Sarah's expression was grim. "It won't die down. Julian, your front-page news, your relationship status affects stock prices. Emma, whether you like it or not, you're now a public figure. The attention will continue. And without active management, the narrative will be written by people who don't have your best interests at heart." As if to prove Sarah's point, Emma's phone began buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Her email inbox was filling with interview requests, invitations to events, and offers for various endorsement deals. "This is insane," Emma muttered, watching the notifications multiply. "This is your life now," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "The question is whether you want to have some control over it or let it control you." Julian moved to sit beside Emma on the couch. "Whatever you decide, I'll support. If you want to retreat from public life, I'll do everything in my power to protect your privacy. If you want to engage on your terms, I'll make sure you have all the resources you need." Emma looked around the room at Lila, whose concern was evident, at Sarah, whose professional competence was both reassuring and intimidating, at Julian, whose love and support were unwavering, but whose very presence in her life had created this situation. "I need some air," she said suddenly, standing up. "I need to think." "Emma," Julian started to rise. "Alone, please. I need a few minutes to process all of this." She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, leaving the three of them in her small apartment to discuss her future without her. The streets of Manhattan were busy with the usual evening rush, and for a few minutes, Emma allowed herself to blend into the crowd of anonymous people going about their normal lives. She found herself walking towards Central Park, seeking the relative quiet of the tree-lined paths. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news. Congratulations on landing the big fish. Hope the money's worth your integrity. A former colleague." Emma stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. This person, whoever they were, had distilled all her fears into one brutal sentence. Was she selling out? Had she compromised her principles for financial security and social status? Another text, this one from a number she recognized. "Emma, it's Dr. Bennett from Columbia. Saw the social media buzz. Don't let the critics get to you. You were one of our most principled students, and I'm sure you still are. Proud of you. Professor B." Professor Bennett had been her ethics instructor and thesis advisor. His message brought tears to her eyes, but also clarity. She wasn't the same person who had started this journey a week ago, but she was still fundamentally herself. The question wasn't whether she was compromising her integrity. It was whether she was strong enough to maintain it under unprecedented pressure. Her phone rang. Evelyn Foster's name appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Foster. Evelyn, dear, and I'm calling because Abigail told me about the social media situation. How are you holding up?" Emma found herself pouring out her fears and frustrations to Julian's grandmother. The professional criticism, the public scrutiny, the feeling of being overwhelmed by forces beyond her control. "Emma," Evelyn said when she finished, "may I tell you a story?" "Of course. When I married Julian's grandfather in 1968, I was 23 years old and working as a secretary at an investment firm. Henry Foster was 35, recently inherited the family business, and considered one of the most eligible bachelors in New York. The society pages had a field day. Emma settled onto a park bench, listening intently. They called me a gold digger, a social climber, a secretary who had seduced her way into wealth. The criticism was vicious and relentless. I cried for weeks. What changed? I realized that their opinion of me mattered far less than my opinion of myself. And more importantly, I understood that I had a choice. I could let their criticism diminish me, or I could use it as motivation to prove them wrong. How did you prove them wrong? By becoming indispensable, by learning everything I could about the business, by contributing ideas and insights that helped the company grow, by earning my place through competence rather than just marriage. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. "Emma, you have skills and talents that brought you to Julian's attention long before he knew your name. Don't let anyone, including yourself, forget that. But the situation is so complicated now. The publicity, the scrutiny, the situation is what you make of it. You can retreat and let others define you, or you can step forward and define yourself. But whatever you choose, make sure it's your choice, not a reaction to other people's expectations." After Evelyn hung up, Emma sat in the park for another hour, watching people walk by and thinking about choices. She thought about the young woman who had spilled coffee on her laptop and been rescued by a kind stranger. She thought about the journalist who had spent years investigating corruption and holding powerful people accountable. She thought about the woman who had impressed Evelyn Foster, not with her pedigree, but with her principles. When she finally returned to her apartment, Sarah was gone, but Julian and Lila were still there, clearly worried. "I'm sorry for running out," Emma said. I needed to get my head straight. And? Julian asked carefully. And I've decided that Sarah is right. If I'm going to be a public figure, I want some control over how I'm presented. But I have conditions. Julian's relief was visible. Name them. First, no lies. We can emphasize positive aspects and downplay negatives, but everything we say publicly has to be true. Agreed. Second, I don't want to become a professional girlfriend. Whatever publicity we do has to include my work as a journalist. I want to use this platform to highlight the stories and causes I care about. That's actually brilliant, Lila interjected. You'll have access to people and platforms you never could have reached before. Third, Emma continued, I want to maintain some privacy. I'll do interviews and public appearances, but my personal space, this apartment, my family, my close friendships, those stay off limits. Sarah can make that work, Julian assured her. And finally, Emma took a deep breath. I want to be involved in every decision about how our relationship is presented publicly. No surprises, no strategies I haven't approved. Julian moved closer to her. Emma, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, it'll be hard to go back to anonymity. I think anonymity was never really an option once I fell in love with you, she said, reaching for his hand. But I'd rather face this challenge as your partner than run away and spend the rest of my life wondering what if. He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, the complications faded away. This was what mattered. Not the publicity or the scrutiny or the business implications, but this connection between them that had started accidentally and grown into something real and precious. So, what's our first move? Emma asked. Sarah suggested a profile piece with a major magazine, something that lets you tell your story in your own words. And then we figure out how to build a life together in the public eye, without losing ourselves in the process. Emma's phone buzzed with another notification, another interview request, another invitation to a high-profile event. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt a spark of determination. These people wanted to know who Emma Larson was. She'd show them, but she'd do it on her own terms. The next morning, Emma woke up to find that someone had leaked photos of Julian leaving her apartment building. The headlines were already writing themselves. Foster heir's overnight visit to girlfriend's modest apartment. And, from penthouse to studio, love knows no boundaries. Instead of panic, Emma felt a strange sense of liberation. The speculation was over. Their relationship was fully public now, which meant they could stop hiding and start living authentically. Her phone rang. Sarah Thompson. Good morning, Emma. I assume you've seen the photos. I have. We need to move quickly now. I've got Vogue interested in an exclusive profile, and Julian's publicist thinks we should coordinate with a business piece for Forbes. We can control the narrative completely. Set up the meetings, Emma said. I'm ready. After hanging up, she looked around her small apartment, the place where this whole adventure had begun, with a mysterious phone call. Soon, she'd probably move somewhere more secure, more appropriate for Julian's girlfriend. But for now, this was still her space, her sanctuary. Julian emerged from her tiny kitchen, carrying 2 cups of coffee, looking ridiculously handsome in rumpled clothes from the night before. Any regrets? He asked, settling beside her on the couch. Emma considered the question seriously. A week ago, she'd been a struggling freelance journalist with an empty bank account and an uncertain future. Now, she was dating a billionaire, being courted by major magazines, and facing a level of public scrutiny that would have terrified her former self. None, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it, only that it took Abigail's manipulation to bring us together. I should have asked you out that day in the cafe. Maybe, or maybe we needed all the complications to appreciate what we have. Julian sat down his coffee and pulled her closer. I love you, Emma Larson. Fake girlfriend, real girlfriend, future wife. Whatever title you want to claim, I love you. Future wife? Emma raised an eyebrow. Too presumptuous? Ask me again in 6 months when we've survived our first major scandal together. Deal. But Emma, he continued, I have a feeling we can survive anything as long as we're honest with each other, and remember that none of this, the money, the publicity, the business pressure matters as much as what we found together. Emma kissed him, tasting coffee and possibility, and the promise of a future that was uncertain but no longer frightening. Outside her window, Manhattan was waking up to another day of possibilities, and for the first time since this whole adventure began, Emma felt ready to meet whatever came next. The accidental bride was becoming an intentional partner, and the story was just beginning. 3 months later, Manhattan. The Vogue profile had been everything Sarah promised and more, shot by Annie Leibovitz in locations that ranged from Emma's old apartment to the Foster Enterprises boardroom. The 12-page spread titled "The Journalist Who Captured a Foster Heart" had repositioned Emma from mystery girlfriend to accomplished professional in the public consciousness. The Forbes piece on Julian had run simultaneously, painting them as a power couple united by shared values and complementary strengths, but it was the investigative piece Emma had published in The Atlantic 3 weeks later that truly changed everything. Corporate accountability in the digital age. How tech giants manipulate public opinion had been 6 months in the making. Begun long before she'd ever heard of Julian Foster. The timing of its publication, however, couldn't have been more perfect. Here was proof that Emma Larson was nobody's trophy girlfriend. She was a journalist with the skills and courage to take on billion-dollar corporations. The article had sparked congressional hearings, SEC investigations, and a reckoning within the tech industry that was still playing out. More importantly for Emma, it had silenced most of her critics and established her as a serious voice in contemporary journalism. Now, as she sat in the back of a town car heading toward the Plaza Hotel for the Metropolitan Museum's annual benefit gala, Emma reflected on how much had changed since that first charity event 3 months ago. "You're nervous," Julian observed, adjusting his bow tie in the reflection of the car window. "A little," Emma admitted, smoothing the skirt of her custom Valentino gown, midnight blue, like the dress from their first evening together, but infinitely more sophisticated. "This is my first Met Gala." The guest list reads like a who's who of American culture. "You'll be fine. You've interviewed senators and CEOs. A few celebrities and philanthropists should be easy." "It's not the celebrities I'm worried about," Emma said. "It's the other journalists. Half the media establishment will be there, and some of them still see me as the journalist who's sleeping her way to access." Julian reached for her hand. "Emma, your Atlantic piece changed the national conversation about corporate responsibility. Anyone who still questions your credentials is willfully ignorant." The car pulled up to the red carpet, and Emma felt her nerves spike. Through the tinted windows, she could see the wall of photographers, the velvet ropes, the controlled chaos of one of New York's most prestigious social events. "Ready?" Julian asked. Emma took a deep breath, remembering Evelyn Foster's advice about defining herself rather than letting others do it. "Ready." The moment they stepped out of the car, camera flashes exploded around them. Emma had grown somewhat accustomed to media attention over the past 3 months, but this was on another level entirely. She could hear photographers shouting their names, reporters calling out questions, fans screaming from behind the barriers. "Emma, Julian, over here, Miss Larson. How does it feel to be dating America's most eligible bachelor? Mr. Foster, any comment on the rumors about an engagement?" That last question made both of them pause. They'd been careful not to discuss marriage publicly, though the speculation had been constant since Evelyn's comments about wedding planning had somehow leaked to the gossip columns. "Just keep walking and smile," Julian murmured, his hand steady on her back as they made their way up the museum steps. Inside the museum, the atmosphere was more controlled, but no less intense. The cream of American society mingled beneath priceless works of art. Champagne flowed freely, and conversations that would shape policy and culture for months to come happened in whispered asides. "Emma Larson," a familiar voice called out across the crowded reception area. Emma turned to see Elizabeth Harper, the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, approaching with a warm smile. Elizabeth had been one of the first major media figures to publicly support Emma during the early days of the scrutiny. "Elizabeth, wonderful to see you. You look absolutely stunning, dear. And congratulations on the Atlantic piece. Brilliant work. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. Have you given any thought to book proposals? I have several publishers who would be very interested in expanding that corporate accountability theme into a full-length investigation." Before Emma could respond, they were joined by David Kim, the investigative reporter whose Pulitzer Prize-winning series on political corruption had inspired Emma to pursue journalism in the first place. "The famous Emma Larson," David said with a grin. "I have to admit, when the social media frenzy first started, I was skeptical. But that Atlantic piece, outstanding work. You've got sources in places most of us can only dream of reaching." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Elizabeth and David discussing story ideas, potential collaborations, and the current state of investigative journalism. Emma found herself relaxing as the discussion moved away from her relationship and focused purely on her professional work. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted. "I couldn't help but overhear." They turned to see a woman in her 52nd with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emma recognized her immediately. Barbara Langston, gossip columnist for the New York Post and one of her harshest critics. "Barbara," Elizabeth said coolly. "How nice to see you, Elizabeth." "David, so good to see you both." "And Miss Larson, of course. I was just telling my readers how fascinating it is to watch someone leverage a romantic relationship into professional opportunities." The comment landed like a slap. Emma felt her cheeks burn. But before she could respond, David stepped forward. "Barbara, that's an interesting perspective, considering Emma's Atlantic piece was in development long before she met Julian Foster. In fact, if you'd done your research, you'd know she was investigating corporate malfeasance while living paycheck to paycheck. Hardly the actions of someone motivated by social climbing." "Of course," Barbara replied smoothly, though one has to wonder about the timing of the publication. So convenient to have such a prestigious platform just when she needed to establish credibility. "The timing," Elizabeth interjected, "was determined by our editorial calendar and the completion of Emma's research. The Atlantic doesn't publish pieces as favors to anyone, regardless of who they're dating." Emma found her voice. "Mrs. Langston, I understand your skepticism. The circumstances of my relationship with Julian are unusual, and I know it's easier to assume the worst about people's motivations, but I'd encourage you to judge me based on my work, not my personal life." "How noble," Barbara said with a condescending smile, "though I can't help but notice that your work has certainly benefited from your access to Foster Enterprises' boardroom. Hasn't it? Amazing how doors open when you're sleeping with the right person." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Emma felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. This was exactly what she'd feared. That no matter what she accomplished, there would always be people ready to diminish it by attributing her success to her relationship rather than her abilities. "That's enough." Julian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared beside Emma, his usual easy charm replaced by something much more dangerous. "Barbara, I believe you owe Emma an apology. Mr. Foster, how gallant. Though I was simply making an observation about you were implying that my girlfriend traded sexual favors for professional advancement," Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. "Which is not only offensive, it's demonstrably false. Emma's investigation began months before we met, involved companies that have no connection to Foster Enterprises, and was completed using sources she developed through years of ethical journalism." "Julian, it's okay," Emma said quietly, though she was grateful for his defense. "No, it's not okay." Julian's eyes never left Barbara's face. "You want to criticize me? Fine. You want to question my business decisions or my qualifications? Have at it." But Emma earned her reputation through talent, integrity, and hard work. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either ignorant or malicious. "Well," Barbara said, clearly flustered by the confrontation, "I certainly didn't mean to imply." "Yes, you did," David interrupted. "Barbara, I've known you for 15 years, and you never say anything you don't mean. The question is whether you're going to apologize for a baseless attack on a colleague's professional integrity." The small crowd that had gathered during the confrontation waited in tense silence. Barbara looked around, clearly realizing she'd overstepped in front of witnesses who wouldn't hesitate to report her behavior. "Of course, perhaps I misspoke. Miss Larson, I apologize if my comments seem to minimize your professional achievements. It was a grudging apology at best, but Emma accepted it graciously. "Thank you, Mrs. Langston. I appreciate that." Barbara retreated, but the encounter had shaken Emma more than she wanted to admit. As the crowd dispersed and conversations resumed, she excused herself to find a quiet corner to collect herself. She found herself in a relatively secluded alcove near the Egyptian wing, trying to process what had just happened. Despite all the positive coverage, despite the success of her Atlantic piece, there were still people who saw her as nothing more than a gold digger who'd gotten lucky. "Emma," Abigail Foster appeared beside her, looking concerned. "I saw what happened with Barbara Langston. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Emma said automatically, then sighed. "No, actually, I'm not fine, Abigail. Does it ever get easier? The constant scrutiny, the assumption that everything I achieve is somehow connected to Julian's influence." Abigail was quiet for a moment, studying Emma's face. "Can I tell you something about why I really arranged for you to meet Julian?" Emma looked up, surprised. I thought we'd covered that. You saw us interact at the cafe and decided to play matchmaker. That's part of it, but not the whole story. Abigail glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Emma, I've been watching Julian struggle with this exact issue for years. Every woman he dated was either after his money or so wealthy herself that the relationship felt like a business merger. He'd started to believe that genuine connection was impossible for someone in his position. And you thought I'd be different because I was broke? I thought you'd be different because of how you reacted when he helped you in the cafe. You thanked him, smiled at him, and walked away. You didn't ask his name, didn't try to extend the interaction, didn't show any interest in who he was or what he could do for you. You treated him like a kind stranger, not a potential opportunity. Emma considered this. I had no idea who he was, exactly. And Emma, in the 3 months since you've been together, have you ever asked Julian to use his influence to advance your career? Have you ever leveraged your relationship for professional gain? Number. Of course not. Of course not, because despite what Barbara Langston and others like her want to believe, you have integrity. You've maintained clear boundaries between your personal and professional life, even when it would have been easier to blur them. But people still assume. People assume what they want to assume. Emma, you can't control other people's opinions. You can only control your own actions. Abigail smiled. And your actions have been exemplary. Before Emma could respond, Julian appeared in the alcove. There you are. I was worried when you disappeared. Just needed a moment, Emma said. That confrontation was more intense than I expected. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Barbara Langston has been a toxic presence in New York media for years. Actually, Emma said, straightening her shoulders, I'm glad it happened because it clarified something important for me. What's that? I've been so focused on proving that I deserve to be with you, that I'm worthy of your family's acceptance, that I belong in your world. But that's the wrong question. Julian and Abigail both looked puzzled. The right question, Emma continued, is whether this world, our world, the one we're building together, is worthy of who we are when we're together. And I think it is. She looked around the museum at the priceless art, the elegantly dressed guests, the carefully orchestrated social theater of high society. This is all beautiful, and I'm grateful to be part of it. But what makes it meaningful isn't the luxury or the exclusivity. It's the opportunity to use privilege responsibly, to leverage access for positive change, to be part of something larger than ourselves. Julian smiled, and Emma saw pride in his expression. That's exactly what I hoped you'd realize. Mr. Foster, Miss Larson, a museum staff member appeared at the entrance to the alcove. I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're about to begin the presentation ceremony. You're needed on stage. Emma looked confused. On stage? I'm not part of any presentation. Abigail and Julian exchanged glances. Actually, Julian said, looking slightly nervous, you are, Emma. The museum is announcing their new Investigative Journalism Fellowship tonight. It's a program to support journalists working on stories about cultural institutions and their social responsibility. That's wonderful. But what does it have to do with me? You're the inaugural recipient, Abigail said with a grin. The fellowship comes with a $100,000 stipend, full access to the museum's archives and resources, and a commitment to publish your findings in a major publication. Emma stared at them. How is that possible? I never applied for any fellowship, because it didn't exist until last month, Julian admitted. The museum board was so impressed with your Atlantic piece that they created the program specifically to support similar work. Julian, please tell me you didn't have anything to do with this. I swear to you, I had no involvement in the selection process. In fact, I didn't even know about it until they called to verify some background information. The museum staff member cleared his throat politely. I'm sorry, but they really do need you on stage now. Emma looked at Julian, then at Abigail, both of whom were beaming with pride and excitement. This is really happening. It's really happening, Julian confirmed. And Emma, it's happening because you earned it. Not because of me, not because of our relationship, but because you're exactly the kind of journalist they want to support. As they made their way back to the main reception area, Emma felt a surge of confidence she hadn't experienced in months. This was validation from one of the most prestigious cultural institutions in America, recognition of her work that had nothing to do with her romantic life. The presentation ceremony was surreal. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of influential New Yorkers, accepting recognition for professional achievement rather than social status. Emma felt like she was finally inhabiting the life she'd always wanted, but never dared to imagine. "This fellowship represents everything I believe about the power of journalism," she said into the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. "The responsibility to investigate, to question, to hold even our most cherished institutions accountable to their highest ideals." She caught sight of Julian in the audience, his face glowing with pride, and felt a rush of love so intense it nearly took her breath away. "I'm honored to be part of this program and excited to begin work on what I hope will be a meaningful contribution to our understanding of cultural institutions in American society." The applause was thunderous. As Emma left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by congratulations, business cards, interview requests, and collaboration offers. For the first time since her relationship with Julian became public, the professional attention was entirely separate from the personal interest. "How does it feel?" Sarah Thompson appeared beside her with a satisfied smile. "To be celebrated for your mind rather than your love life." "Incredible," Emma said honestly. "Like I can finally breathe." "Good, because this is just the beginning. That fellowship is going to open doors you didn't even know existed. And Emma, they're doors you'll be walking through because you earned the right to be there." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of networking, celebration, and growing excitement about the fellowship project. By the time she and Julian finally returned to his penthouse, her apartment had become impractical once the paparazzi discovered her address. Emma was exhausted but exhilarated. "I'm proud of you," Julian said as they stood on his terrace overlooking Central Park. "Not just for tonight, but for how you've handled everything these past 3 months. The scrutiny, the criticism, the pressure to become someone else. You've stayed true to yourself through all of it." "It wasn't easy," Emma admitted. "There were times I wanted to run away from all of it. The attention, the expectations, even from you." "What changed?" Emma considered the question. "I realized that running away would mean giving up the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't just mean our relationship, though that's certainly part of it. I mean the life we're building together, the opportunities we have to make a real difference." Julian pulled her closer. "Speaking of the life we're building together," something in his tone made Emma look up at him more sharply. "Julian." "What?" "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart stopped. "Julian, before you panic," he said quickly, "this isn't what you think it is. Or rather, it's not what you think it is yet." He opened the box to reveal not an engagement ring, but a key, old-fashioned, ornate, clearly vintage. "It's the key to the house in the Hamptons, the one next to my grandmother's estate." Julian's nervousness was evident now. "I bought it last month, thinking, hoping, that maybe you'd want to spend summers there with me as a place that's ours. Not mine or yours, but ours." Emma stared at the key, understanding its significance. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about commitment, about building a shared life, about taking the next step without rushing into marriage before they were both ready. "Julian, it's beautiful, but I can't let you buy me a house. You're not letting me buy you anything. I'm asking you to share something with me." "There's a difference." Emma picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. "What about my independence, my career? I don't want to become someone who just orbits around your life. That's exactly why I bought the house. It has a separate wing that would be perfect as a writing studio. Natural light, library space, complete privacy when you need to work. You could use it as a base for your fellowship research or for the book Elizabeth mentioned. You were listening to that conversation. I'm always listening when people talk about how brilliant you are." Emma laughed, feeling some of her tension ease. "So, this is what exactly? A commitment ceremony for people too practical for engagement? This is me saying that I love you, that I want to build a life with you, and that I'm confident enough in what we have to invest in our shared future." Julian paused. "And maybe, if things continue going well, there might be a different kind of key and a different kind of box sometime in the next year or two. Just a key, though, for now. Just a key, for now." Emma looked out at the city spread below them, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling journalist who couldn't pay her rent. Tonight, she'd been honored by one of the most prestigious institutions in America and offered a key to a shared future with a man she loved desperately. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to the house. Yes to the shared life. Yes, to building something together that's bigger than either of us could create alone. Julian's smile could have powered the city below. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the terrace as the lights of Manhattan twinkled beneath them. "I love you, Emma Larson," he said when he finally set her down. "I love you, too, Julian Foster. Even if you are completely crazy. Crazy enough to believe in accidental perfection. Crazy enough to believe in intentional happiness." As they kissed under the stars, Emma reflected on how much had changed since Abigail's perfect mistake had brought them together. What had started as deception had become the foundation for complete honesty. What had begun as a financial transaction had evolved into emotional investment. What had seemed like an impossible mismatch had revealed itself as perfect complementarity. The accidental bride had become an intentional partner, ready to build a life that honored both her independence and their connection. And if sometimes that life would be lived in the public eye, with all the scrutiny and pressure that entailed, at least it would be lived authentically, with integrity and with love. 6 months later, when Julian did present her with a different kind of box containing a different kind of promise, Emma's answer would be just as simple and just as certain: yes to him, yes to them, yes to the beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they were creating together. But that's another story entirely. For now, it was enough to stand on a terrace overlooking the city where they'd found each other, holding the key to their shared future, and knowing that the best accidents sometimes lead to the most intentional choices.